Welcome to Music Mania. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today, Music Mania is actually coming out on the right day of the week, as opposed to last week, but regardless of the timing change, there's still quite a bit of things to talk about today. I have some things to catch up on from last week, and also several new singles, like a large amount of singles this week in comparison to previous weeks, and then a lot of writing that I did in which I re-listened to some things. So let's just kind of jump into things like I normally do. Start off with the one album that I missed from last week being the new Cradle of Filth album, which I hadn't realized was really a thing until it happened upon my Spotify the other day. So I actually listened to this. This is my first Cradle of Filth album, mind you, so my opinions on this are not, colored by any of their previous stuff, whether that be the stuff that everyone loves from their older back catalog or any of the more recent albums, which most of my friends haven't really listened to in the first place. But I thought that The Screaming of the Valkyries was a solid record. It was definitely enjoyable to me. I really liked it, and quite frankly, it surprised me in a lot of ways. It took me about one song to get used to the vocals on it, because again, I haven't listened to any previous Cradle of Filth, so I don't have really any experience with that, but a lot of the songs on here I enjoyed quite a bit. I would overall give this album a solid 4 stars or something like that. I believe this album I listened to on the 26th it was. So everything here is going to be, as of the last few days. But all of the records this week, I'm only going to give the recommend titles, and then I'll write reviews after the fact. If you want to see reviews, check out my Musicboard linked in the description below. But yeah, I highly recommend The Screaming of the Valkyries. I thought it was super solid. So we'll call that good and move on now to some of the actual new releases. There are a couple new albums that came out this week that I was looking forward to giving a shot. The first one of those was Blood Dynasty by Arch Enemy, and this is, I believe they're technically a melodeath band. They definitely had a lot of that energy in this album, both some of the songs that had a little bit more of the newer type of soundscape that reminded me more of newer melodeath, kind of like this 9th track down here gave me some vibes of that, but several riffs on other songs reminded me more of the early 2000s era of melodeath, which is kind of where that genre and early metalcore have some similarities in a lot of riffage. But I enjoyed this album. It was also my first Arch Enemy album. Thought it was pretty solid, but overall not super stand out. I'd have to listen to it again, paying a little bit more attention admittedly than I did the first time, but I had a lot of fun with this one, so we'll go ahead and call that. And I recommend, if I could spell that right, Blood Dynasty. Sometimes I really struggle with typing. Typing isn't always easy. So that's Arch Enemy. Next up is Shapeshifter by Memphis, another example of an album for some reason not having the cover on Musicboard for whatever reason that I couldn't find. But either way, this is an album that I feel like should have released a long time ago, and that's because 8 of these 10 songs released as singles. Why? Releasing half of an album as singles is already overdoing it, but by the time you have a 10-track album and 8 of those songs are released ahead of time as singles, that just gets to be really, really overkill. I don't like that, so I only ended up listening to the first 3 or 4. I'm pretty sure, no, I listened to the first 4 singles actually, and that was already, kind of pushing the limit, because these types of modern metalcore bands don't release long albums in the first place. This thing's only half hour long, so to have listened to, nearly an entire half of it just through 4 singles and then 4 more singles releasing after that meant there was a lot of time in between the singles that I listened to and enjoyed, and the album release, so I just don't like that actual organization of release. I really, really don't like that. It just super gets on my nerves. I liked the album a lot, however, and think it's a shame that that they released so much of it as singles, because I think people who listened to all those singles as they came out probably aren't getting a new experience with the album and are maybe going to just be whelmed with it. I think this album is more consistent than their last one, for example. Again, I really like it. Several great songs, a lot of great choruses for, the era of metalcore that I'm most in love with. This is, basically that. So it's something that I really enjoy as a result, but I really wish this album dropped like 4 to 6 months ago, whenever it was, the fifth single came out. Should have been around the time the album came out, and it would have landed a lot better both for me and probably for a lot of other people as well. I've seen even already a couple other reviews here on Musicboard saying that it was just a lot of singles. There's no reason to release that many singles unless you're chasing after, the streaming, like each song getting added to playlists and whatnot. Like from a business perspective, it sort of makes sense, but from a listening perspective, like it just release singles consistently instead of releasing an album all as singles, in my opinion. It just, if there's no other thing to go along with it, like if you're not releasing full-blown music videos for every single or for every song, you don't need to release that many singles. And even then, it's still a questionable decision. So I recommend Shapeshifter, not as the singles, which, I'll explain in the actual review itself when I get to that point. That took a little while to load. The other thing that we have to talk about this week is not a new album, actually. It's a new EP, and this one legitimately an EP because it's 3 songs, and that is a dual album that a lot of my friends have been looking forward to. Bloom in Heaven by Invent Animate and Silent Planet together as one. And this EP was one that I wasn't sure how I felt about going in, because I believe the one single for it they released ahead of time, Return to One, not super into personally. And also, I'm not the biggest fan of either Invent Animate or Silent Planet individually. I enjoy some things from each band, but for the most part, there are things that they do that just don't fully click for me. Like Silent Planet's most recent album, Super Bloom, I enjoyed a bit, but still not particularly my thing when I feel like it should be. Invent Animate, I enjoy Heavener a good bit, and I really like another one of their releases, which we'll actually be talking about a little bit later in this video. But overall, neither of these bands I fully love. So I wasn't necessarily going into Bloom in Heaven with super high hopes, but fortunately, I think the elements of both bands that I do like have shined through overall on this release to a degree that actually, legitimately works for me. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but I did enjoy it a good bit more than I thought I would. And I think with repeated listens, which I'm definitely going to be doing with this, I'll come to love it even more. Something like the Invent Animate release that we'll be talking about a little bit later in this video might be something like what happens with this. So I will say surprisingly recommend Bloom in Heaven. Let's go ahead and capitalize that properly, review the EP, and now we'll move on to the new single releases for the week. Starting off with the new Linkin Park song, which I think is super solid. As far as Emily's vocals go, I think she's a great inclusion of the band. I enjoyed From Zero a good bit. I think Up From the Bottom is another example of that. The band exploring their own soundscape while adjusting it a little bit, fitting that to Emily and Emily fitting within the band. It's going over super well, in my opinion. I really enjoyed the song, actually. I've listened to it several times already this morning, and I think it's great. I'm surprised this wasn't, like included on the actual album itself several months ago, but, really, really good stuff. I would love to see this song live, particularly. I'm upset that I'm not going to be able to see these guys live this year. Next up is Gloom by Tara Mays. I have a complicated relationship with Tara Mays' single structure because they seem to release a lot of random songs at random times, and some of them are associated with each other and other times aren't. Really weird kind of thing they got going on, but Gloom might be my favorite song that I've heard from them at this point. It is super good song, actually. Like really shockingly good. I believe my favorite single by these guys previously was like maybe Black Sound. It might have been one of the other singles that was released somewhere around the same time that one was. I've enjoyed a couple of their other songs and one of their albums that I've listened to a good bit. They're not fully my type of like this sort of proggy rock metal type thing that they've got going on, more on the rock side. But Gloom, really good, really enjoyable song. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And this one, similar to Up From the Bottom, I've listened to several times already this morning. Next is Hellbound by Abbey Falls, the third single they've released now in what is presumably an upcoming album cycle. And I love Victim. I really enjoy Purge, despite some aspects of it being a little repetitive. Hellbound seems to be a little bit more of a bridge track. I'm not sure why this was chosen as a single specifically. This doesn't really strike as a single song. I don't dislike it, but I feel like I'm going to be more of a fan of this, come an actual album release and seeing where it fits in that sort of context. So I have reservations about the song in that way, but I didn't hate it, just didn't really feel like a single to me, so that is my rating on that. Otherwise, I listened to Synthetic Sun, the new Wolves at the Gate single. I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys have coming out, because Parasite, which was a single they released a good bit before, was good, but not anything super standout. Synthetic Sun is notably more standout. I would actually be inclined to give this a full 4 stars instead of just 3.5. I don't remember exactly what rating I gave Parasite. It might have just been 3 stars or something like that, but Synthetic Sun was a good single, and I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys have coming out. Next up was Crocodile Tears by Mortal Reminder, and it's just okay, I guess. It's not a bad deathcore song, but it's not a particularly standout one either. It's just, doing what it does, and that's about it. Nothing really notable to say one way or the other. I think the album these guys released last year was solid, and that kind of like, it's not doing anything new with the genre, but it doesn't need to type thing, and this single is kind of a little bit more of that. And then I also listened to the new Kardashev single. This is a group that was put on my radar by another one of my friends, and I enjoyed the song. Nothing like particularly notable. I'm looking forward to see more what this ends up being as a full album, because I also, moving into my personal listened to the other single that they had released earlier this year, because it's obviously another single for the same upcoming album, and I think I liked this single a little bit more, but I'm going to give them basically the same rating. I'm not familiar enough with these guys or their soundscape to really know how I feel for sure yet, but I am looking forward to hearing more, because I didn't dislike it at all, so there's that. Next up is the Invent Animate release that I've been hinting at this entire time. The Sun Sleeps As If It Never Was is the one example of an Invent Animate release that I just adore. It's the only one of their releases that I, have more than that I have significantly positive emotions about. I think Heavener is a pretty good and decent album overall, but I still feel like it could have been, a couple of those songs could have been trimmed down a bit. I think a couple of those songs have a couple weird decisions. I think a couple more could have been even taken off the record entirely, and you had something a little bit tighter, like 6 songs, like an EP that was even better than the album already was. I really enjoyed that album. I think it was number 4 album of the year in 2023, so I obviously enjoyed it a lot, but The Sun Sleeps As If It Never Was is the Invent Animate thing that really, really hits for me, and is the one example of something that I've loved since the first time that I listened to it. I don't know why this specifically clicks for me so well, but it does, and I'm expecting Bloom in Heaven to kind of inch its way towards this kind of status. Short releases like this are also super easy to listen to anyway, because only a few songs, only about 10 to 12 minutes, really easy to give up that kind of time when you're preparing for work or whatever, when you otherwise don't have enough time to listen to another full album or anything. I really enjoy The Sun Sleeps As If It Never Was, and I was glad to take the opportunity to listen to it again now that I'm kind of in that specific realm of metalcore in terms of my mood. I also did, few other re-listens this week. I listened to A Day to... Sorry, I got something scratchy in my throat. A Day to Remember's new album, Big Ol' Album Volume 1, a couple more times this week. So I just put these re-listens up on here, including one where I actually increased the rating from 4 stars up to 5 stars, because in Spotify I have actually marked Feedback, that second track on the album, as hidden. I basically never do this kind of thing, but Feedback is just kind of so weird and included on the album at the most kind of unfortunate time, I suppose. It just doesn't really make sense sonically to have it included on the album. So I went ahead and hid that, and the other 9 songs altogether still make a full-length album for, what these guys tend to do sometimes. I think this album is awesome, actually. I really, really, really enjoy it. I thoroughly love it all the way through, and as long as you skip Feedback, I think anybody who's a fan of Day to Remember should enjoy this album. So that's what I did. Speaking more of A Day to Remember, I did actually listen to What Separates Me From You, one of their more classic albums for me. Again, just yesterday, I believe, was when I listened to this. And I'm going to give this 4 stars. So for me, A Day to Remember, I think their early work, so some of their pre-2010s work, is generally overrated. Homesick, for example, I'm not a big fan of, or at least I don't remember being a big fan of. no matter how many times I've listened to it, I think it is overrated as far as like the metalcore community is concerned. I enjoy one of their other early albums a good bit for what it is, but I think the Day to Remember stuff that I've always liked the most was What Separates Me From You and Common Courtesy. They were the soundscapes that most melded to my musical tastes at the time that I was listening to a lot of A Day to Remember. So I'll say I recommend What Separates Me From You. I suppose I should have been doing this on the couple EP releases that I've talked about. I'll go through and edit all these ratings and stuff like that after the fact. I've already said that. That's fine. I enjoy What Separates Me From You a lot, even still. But I guess for whatever reason, Big Ol' Album is just kind of utilizing versions of like the both pop punky stuff and metalcore stuff that is more like what I like today than what Separates Me From You did. But I am looking forward to listening to Common Courtesy again here soon as my other, remembered favorite album from these guys, to see like how that fits in comparison to both of these two. That's something that I'm keen on finding out. So otherwise, I just re-listened to Oneironaut and Paradoxica a couple times while doing some writing stuff this week. And that should be, if I'm not mistaken, all of the music that I listened to this week. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you did, what did you think of some of the new albums that I talked about? What did you think of Arch Enemy? What did you think of Cradle of Filth's new album? That's one I'm curious on hearing from, especially for people who've been longtime fans of the band. I want to hear what more people have to say on that front, because again, most of my friends haven't really listened to any of their stuff for, a decade or a couple decades at this point. So I'm curious to hear what some other people have to think about that, because as a first-time listener, I liked the new album a good bit. I've gotten recommendations already for some of their older stuff to check out, especially some of the more classic albums. But either way, I really was a fan of that, and I want to hear what people have to say about the Invent Animate Silent Planet collab. I think, a ton of people there are who love both bands are like, this never was going to be a miss, and so love it. But there are also a couple people who I thought would really like it who've been a little bit more lukewarm on it, so I'm curious to hear what other people have to say about that. But otherwise, I guess that's all I have to say for this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.